Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about the Pillars of Eternity games, as well as Obsidian Entertainment's upcoming release, Avowed. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you guys so much for joining me as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for the world that is Eora, the fantasy setting that we find in Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, as well as Obsidian's upcoming game, Avowed. Since Avowed's not out yet and there's a lot of hype around it, the idea is that if we dive into Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, which shares the same world, that we can kind of get an idea of what the game Avowed might be like in terms of a story, in terms of themes, mechanics, and just know a little bit more about the world going into it, as well as just an opportunity for those of us who love this world to geek out about it and have fun with it. Little heads up for today's episode and potentially episodes going forward. I have sustained a wrist injury from an increase of volume at work, doing a lot of repetitive movements, lifting, manipulating boxes, using different implements to be able to move things around, and just a lot of driving on gravel roads. I have either tendonitis or carpal tunnel or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, my wrists hurt a lot, and they're in splints. I can't really do much typing, and using the mouse and stuff is difficult, so I don't think I can edit an episode the way that I have in the past. It's just not going to be feasible to do, and it also will not promote healing in my hands, and so therefore I'm not going to be doing that. What I'm going to instead try to do, and I'm hoping that this episode turns out well as a result, is I'm just going to try to do it in one go, or do it in segments and just record segments until I'm pleased with it. It's going to take a little longer to record, so as a result, that I might have a little bit more of a I don't know what you would say, a scattered release schedule. I'll still try to stick to my regular schedule, but I'm going to be adjusting this until I heal, which is hopefully going to be in a couple of months, but we'll see going forward. Today we're continuing our topic as we have in the last two episodes. We're just talking about some factions that we find in the Pillars of Eternity guidebooks, and we've finally gone through factions that we see in Defiance Bay from Pillars of Eternity 1 and the City of Twin Elms from Pillars of Eternity 1. Today we're jumping into Pillars of Eternity 2, Deadfire, and we're going to be talking about a few religious factions that we see in the Deadfire, possibly even some saints and some relics as a result. I have right in front of me a hardcover copy of the Pillars of Eternity 2 guidebook. In fact, actually, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna take a photo of this and post it on Twitter so you guys can see it. So when you listen to this episode and you're like, "Oh, I saw that picture earlier on," now you know the context for when I took this photo. Just a second. Okay, there, I posted it. I posted the photo of the book next to a French press of coffee for those who are following me on Twitter. But just so you guys are aware, there's still, I think, a couple of copies of a hardcover of that book on Amazon for a relatively good price. So go check that out, see if you can get a copy before they get all taken or they rise in price like the other guidebook has. Anyways, no news to go over for either of the games, at least that I'm aware of at this point in time. So with that, we're just going to jump right into the lore.
I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
All right, everyone. If you have your guidebooks with you, whether you found them in the game files for Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire or you have your own hard copy, I'd like you to turn to page 80 of the Pillars of Eternity 2 guidebook, chapter 7, and we'll be reading verses 1 through 80. Okay, I didn't mean to make it sound like that. What am I saying? Yes, I did mean to make it sound like that. I don't know why, but this is the kind of stuff that I cut out when I record, so apologies in advance for a lot of this. All right, so we're diving into a section of the Pillars of Eternity 2 guidebook that is Churches of Eora, and so we have a few religious factions that we're going to go over, and these are not all necessarily groups that you see in the game. Some of them are, you do interact with them, but some of them you just hear about, or some of them we don't even hear about in the game. You can only hear about it in this particular book. And the reason we bring this up is because, one, it's just cool to learn about. Two, if you're doing a tabletop role-playing game set in Eora, set in Deadfire specifically, you can introduce some of these factions into your game. And three, depending on where Avowed is taking place, you might interact with any or all of these factions. I know the popular theory right now is that it's going to be in the Living Lands, but we don't know. We have no idea. We don't know if we're going to be in the Deadfire. It's possible, and we don't know how far in the future. Maybe some of these factions have expanded wildly beyond the Deadfire. Who knows? But we're going to dive into them today. The first one is Children of the Dawnstars, and the Children of the Dawnstars are related to a faith and religion connected to one of the main gods of Eora. In Eora, like many other fantasy settings, there are gods and deities, right? So if you're playing D&D in some world, or you're watching a fantasy series on Amazon Prime, like there's gods that exist in the background somewhere, and sometimes they're a little overt. You hear about them a lot, you actually talk to them a lot, and sometimes they're just hidden in the background working on the mechanics of the world. I don't know. In Eora, there are 11 deities, and they're very involved with the main character from Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2. And they are central characters and focuses of the everyday lives of the people that live in this world. Now, Children of the Dawnstars are kind of like a sect or a cult, or they're a branch off of an Aethasian faith. That is, the faith and religions built off of the god Aethys. Aethys being the god of light, god of redemption, god of renewal, of dawn and dusk, etc., etc. So, Children of the Dawnstars. After the death of Saint Widwin, who was a notable figure from Pillars of Eternity 1, I've talked about him before, melancholy swept throughout the theocratic colony of Rhaed Saris, which is the area that Saint Widwin was from. Aethasians struggled to find meaning in the defeat of their god. What basically happened was Aethys inhabited the man Saint Widwin, and he led a religious war against a neighboring country of the Deerwood, and they blew him up. And you wouldn't think that you could kill a god man, but not only did they kill the man, but apparently they speculate, with a foundation to believe in this speculation, they think that they actually killed the god Aethys using the god hammer bomb. So Aethasian followers are a little bit like, what just happened to our faith? Who are we? What is the world? What have we built our identities on? What is life? What is reality? Who are we? Flip tables, that whole thing. Scrambling to restore order, battle-hardened priests transformed their governments into penitential regency, which could function until Aethys inevitably returned to reclaim his throne. All the while, the citizens of Rhaed Saris, who didn't flee the vengeance of their enemies, turned on the neighbors, rooting the faithless wherever it could be found out and blaming them for the downfall. So obviously, when you mount a religious war against a neighboring country, and that neighboring country blows up your god and your patron saint, they don't like you afterwards, and they don't like your faith, and they don't like the people in their country that practice your faith, and so they persecute and destroy them. That can tend to happen. People are angry and violent, and they will take it out on people, even if they weren't necessarily connected to the religious war, but there's a way to connect them. It's a whole thing, right? So that happened. And then on the flip side of that, in your own country, there are people who are followers of this faith that are seeking out those who didn't assist, I guess, in the religious wars. Kind of what it sounds like. They weren't really following faithfully. They were a little more faithless than the rest of them, and they're saying it's your fault that our god failed. It's your fault that this failed. You didn't have enough faith. This didn't succeed because of people like you. So everyone on both sides of this war, on the outcome of this war, are doing us versus them mentality stuff, and they're finding people to blame for what happened. On top of their other woes, the Rhaed Sarin crops of dye-producing Vorlus plants failed to yield a harvest. This is important because Rhaed Saris' main export is this Vorlus crop, and it's really important for the purple dye industry, which to you and me might not sound like a big deal, but in times where dyeing clothing could mean, an indication of wealth or indication of status or what have you, kind of like, how you might see someone with a brand name article of clothing or a certain make and model of a vehicle. It indicates a level of status and wealth and success or something like that. At least it has for a long period of time. I think that kind of thing is on the downswing now. But Vorlus produces purple dye, and that is historically the rarest color to be able to pigment clothing in. That's true in our own world as well. A lot of royalty used to be colored in purple in ancient societies because it was the hardest color to achieve in fabrics. At least that's if I remember correctly. And so they're not able to export this high demand product as a result of everything that happened. So they're also crippling economically on top of theocratically, so on a government level as well. Some 10,000 of the faithful left the colony to seek employment where they could find it, and where persecution would not follow. Aiming their ships towards the rising sun was an act as symbolic as it was practical, narrowing their purpose on a trajectory with a symbol of hope and rebirth. So this explains how the Children of the Dawn Stars ended up in the Deadfire region of Eora, because they would have originated in a continent known as Eastern Reach, where all of this strife and events happened. And they're like, okay, well, we're getting persecuted in our neighboring countries because they don't like what we did. We're getting persecuted in our own country because they don't like that we didn't do enough. There's nowhere for us to go without getting persecuted. What are we going to do? Well, they follow the god of, sunrise and sunset. And so they set their sails towards I guess it would be sunset. Or, it would be the sunrise. Rises in the east, sets in the west. I believe it would be the east, right? So they were setting their sails eastwards towards the sunrise. Very fitting for their religious faith. And they would end up in the Deadfire. And so that's why we see the Children of the Dawn Stars in the Deadfire. At least that's the justification that we see here in the lore. To the delight of these wayward pilgrims, their crops took to Deadfire soil better than they had in Rayed Saris, where the Aediran Emperor had always insisted on planting crops which were ill-suited to the region. So a big reason that Rayed Saris were producing these Vorless plants that had purple dye was because of an agreement they had with their mother nation, the Aedir Empire. They wanted a lot of this Vorless stuff and they were willing to pay for it, but they also levied a lot of demands on how things are going to work. At least that's what it sounds like here. But now these people have left this land and they've struck out on their own and they started planting these purple dye plants in the Deadfire soil and they find, it actually takes better here. And we're independent from the Aedir Empire, so we can actually do this for our own benefit instead of having to do it for some other dictator. Those who persisted in farming eventually settled on pea berries as a hardy staple crop. Okay, so it sounds like they planted more than Vorlass, or perhaps they were not planting Vorlass. I might have misunderstood that part. But either way, the Deadfire soil was better than the Rayed Sarin soil for what they were trying to do. Others located to colonial settlements or Huana villages. Huana is a smattering of cultures across the Deadfire. It's basically one Amauan cultural set of tribes that exist on different islands. Each island kind of governs itself, but all of these tribes across the archipelago of the Deadfire archipelago is the Huana peoples. Others relocated to colonial settlements or Huana villages, where they carved out positions of usefulness in tribal societies and spread their Aethasian faith without fear of oppression. So they're essentially starting anew. Owing to their selfless ambitions, the Dawn Stars have enjoyed favorable dealings with the Huana. As far as the trading companies are concerned, close involvement with local affairs have earned the Dawn Stars a reputation as petty irritants, though nothing approaches violence has broken out over largely political and ethical conflicts. So the Children of the Dawn Stars are basically starting over in the Deadfire archipelago, which is probably a good thing. I'm personally not a fan of mounting religious wars against neighboring countries, especially since I think a lot of Aethasian faiths are usually more, good aligned if you're going with alignment systems. They're usually a lot more on the happy side, on the do good to others side. So seeing a religious war is kind of like, what's going on here? I mean, when your god inhabits a man and tells you to go do it, you do it, right? That's the thing. So for me, I like seeing them start fresh in a new place, and them sharing their life and their faith with the people around there. That doesn't bother me either, because it's just people sharing themselves with other people. It depends on how they're doing it. It doesn't sound like they're being violent about it, so okay, so far so good, but we'll see where they are in the future. That's the Children of the Dawn Stars. That's where they're from, how they ended up in the Deadfire, and what they're doing now. They're just sort of planting their flag and starting fresh. Next up is a group of people called Bright Shepherds. This is also related to the Aethasian faiths from Rayed Saris, so similar to Children of the Dawn Stars, but they are taking a more specific approach to how they are living out their faith in their life now. In the midst of this political upheaval in Rayed Saris, a fraction of the citizens who held back from joining Wywin's militaristic advance turned away from their home colony with disappointment and sorrow. So these are essentially people who did not support the religious war in Rayed Saris. They didn't when Widewind apparently was inhabited by their god, they didn't join the forces and they left it, but they still stayed true to their faith. So it's kind of a weird place to be in the middle of. They do not mourn the death of Widewind, but judge the departure of Aethys as a call to change their ways. Instead of inflicting their faith on the world with the sword and pitchfork, their goal was to bring Aethys' light to the dark places of the world, be they crypts, forest trails, or the homes of the poor. So it sounds like this split, essentially, the Church of Aethys. A lot of people were going off to war, following Aethys and Widewind, and the rest of these Aethasian followers were like, no, this isn't what our faith is about. We're not doing this. We're going to stay true to what we believe that it is, and we're going to do good things for people, and we're going to go to the darkest places of the world, and we're going to bring light to it. And that does sound like a very Aethasian thing to do, at least in my opinion. The Bright Shepherds sought to escape those who would vilify both them near and abroad, having departed Rhaedceres under cover of night. Having invested much of their time and resources in working with tallow and beeswax, they were able to support themselves on the sale of candles. Many a Deerwooden lord who illuminated their keep, and cursed all Rhaedcerans, unknowingly did so by the light of Aethasian candles. There's something hilarious and ironic about that, to know that you could be a Deerwooden lord sitting at the table with your officers or your family, lit by candlelight, and saying, oh, those dang Rhaedcerans, those dang Aethasians, how dare they, they're the scum of the earth, and blah, blah, blah. Move that candle over, will you? It's a little dark over here. All of the candles are made from Rhaedceran wax. So you've supported them, in a way. But I feel like this is pretty apropos for Bright Shepherds and what they're trying to do. It's an interesting image or metaphor. Rituals and demonstrations across the continent necessarily went underground, save for the rare instance when the worship of Aethys could be overlooked in plain sight. So it sounds to me like there were times where people are okay with them worshiping in public, but largely a lot of these followers had to go underground because people didn't accept them for their faith anymore publicly. They were maligned. They were sought out and hunted, understandably, but not excusably, I guess, in my opinion. One such practice traces back to the peaceful Bright Shepherds, expatriates, who made regular pilgrimages between Deerwood and the borders of their former homeland, which would be Rhaedceres. Rather than any particular sites or landmarks, the journey itself was the objective, as they would place lit candles along the path between nations. Theirs was not a fanatical devotion to Aethys, but a mild and hopeful one, in which they invited their god to find his way home. The candles represented a path outlined for Aethys to return when his people needed him most. I find this happens a lot in religious rituals and devotions, is that you will act out these things in real life, which are metaphors or symbols for some other meta-narrative within your faith or in the background of the metaphysics in the world. You can see this in a lot of different faiths. I'm not familiar with all the faiths out there, so I don't know kind of stuff. I know in the Christian faith, they'll quite often on a random Sunday do things like the breaking of the bread and the drinking of the wine, which is supposed to reenact a key moment in the biblical narrative. And this kind of thing happens a lot, not just in, I guess, religious faiths as well. This can happen even in, I guess, political ideologies. If there's a origin story for a particular ideology, you might reenact certain things, or even important parts of history. I mean, like how much money goes into Civil War reenactments in America because it's an important part of their history. They don't want to forget it and they want to honor it, and this is a way of remembering it. This is just a human thing to do. The Bright Shepherds' continued existence depends partially on the night market, a secretive and devout sect of Aethasians who ensure that their peers are able to worship freely and unhindered. When bounty hunters or mobs track down Aethasians, the night market acts to deter or waylay these figures before they catch up with their charges. Being both pacifists and often isolated in the Deerwood wilderness, the Bright Shepherds are some of the market's most vulnerable clients. So there we go. I believe the night market has a presence in Deadfire, so that might be the connection to the book here, seeing as how this is a Deadfire book. But that's the Bright Shepherds. I would say the more peace-loving, pacifist, candle-lit Aethasian side of the faith. And they also have the Children of the Dawn Stars around as well. I wonder if they get along or not. I don't know. Next up is Champions of the Letter. I've talked about these guys in a previous episode. I think when I was talking about Woodica, because these are Woodican-aligned people. They follow the god Woodica, goddess Woodica, the goddess of justice and law and all that sort of stuff. She's usually the bad guy in every game. And based off what we've seen in the reveal trailer, she's going to be present in that as well, especially given the title of the game, Avowed, which has to do with swearing an oath, and Woodica being the goddess of oaths. Seems very, very indicative that Woodica is going to be involved. Whether or not she's the protagonist side or the antagonist side, we don't know. Probably the antagonist side, because she's not a great person to be around, in my opinion. I know Sora from Avowedcast is a huge fan. I'm less of a fan of Woodica, although I will say the writing around her can be pretty good. I found her very uninteresting at first, but after really digging into it, started to get into her character. I love the narrative behind it. Anyways, that's all for a different episode. Sorry, I'm getting lost track of. More stuff that you would hear if I didn't cut all this stuff out. So, this group is called Champions of the Letter. Woodica is a favored deity of Eora's administrative clerks and more litigious-minded kith. And that makes sense. Woodica being the goddess of law and justice and right rulership and oaths and all this stuff. A lot of bureaucrats will follow her. A lot of clerks and lawyers and judges will follow her because she draws lines and she has processes and this is how things work. She often changes her own rules or subverts her own rules, but she's the goddess of law. She can, what she says goes. So she can do what she wants, but everyone else has to follow the rational path, the straight and narrow path. This is what you do, this is what you don't. So it makes sense that those people would enjoy Woodica's faith a little more. In keeping with her portfolio of compacts and law, Champions of the Letter are devoted to the rigid accuracy of all documentation. Their members represent a broad swath of cultures who owe no allegiance to any government. Rather, they seek official sponsorship or charter. They sternly avoid partnerships which would compromise their objectivity. So it sounds to me like the Champions of the Letter, they are the Champions of the Letter. They essentially are like, this is documentation, signed contracts. These are the ways to move forward in society. These are the pillars of how we can have a peaceful society where everyone has written agreements and we all are beholden to them. They really believe in this. And to a point, it's kind of true. Look at a lot of things that have been able to be accomplished in the world through the use of written contracts and being held accountable to those contracts. Look at how the signing of a declaration or of something when a nation starts up, that it forms a nation. Look at the Constitution for America or Canada, which is where I live. It forms the basis for the country, and people sign it saying, yes, this is what this country is founded on, this is what we're going to move forward in. And look what it's accomplished in a lot of ways. The paper itself obviously doesn't do anything, but it's the agreement of what's on the paper that matters. And the existence of that contract maintains that agreement in a sense. And so these people really believe in the power of that, and they beholden themselves to that objectivity before anything else. Their self-imposed duty is to closely review and edit any official documentation, with no scrap of parchment considered too insignificant for their attention. If a colonial governor requisitions materials to fix a crumbling sewer gate, the likelihood that a champion of the letter would intercept and review the request is startlingly high. So it sounds to me like they view any sort of written contract, any sort of documentation, any sort of objective notation, really, as sacred. Really, if this was a religious thing, they would call it sacred documents, the sacred scriptures or something like that. It's a piece of, it's a holy relic in a sense, it's something for them to scrutinize and look through, because these are the things upon which society is built on. These are the things that will move us forward as a people, etc., etc. So they take these things very seriously, even small little documents, like, someone trying to get a sewer gate fixed. They want to make sure that there is a standard that is reached. It's admirable to a point, although if you look at the history of Woodican followers in Eora through the Pillars of Eternity games, might not necessarily be the nicest about it, but who knows? I don't think you actually meet any champions of the letter overtly in the Pillars of Eternity games. When documents are found to contain misinformation, contradiction, or an otherwise innocent lack of clarity, the champions put intense pressure on officials to have their wording redrafted in a manner of befitting the dignity and trust of their station, essentially holding people accountable to the position that they're in, to be thorough, to be clear. And that's a good point, because it's a slippery slope where you can, have a contract written up and you can just, miss a comma here or there. And then if you change your mind on something, you can be like, well, it's not really clear in the contract what I meant when I wrote it up, so we're going to go with this because this is what I feel like right now. There is room to abuse the power of the station that you have by not writing up a clear contract for the people that are working for you. So in a sense, like this kind of organization does need to exist. Due to the meddlesome and unsolicited nature of their activities, the champions are widely antagonized. Harmless as they may seem, they create additional work in order to satisfy their fanatical attention to detail. Government officials pray to Wodka not to draw the ire of their followers, and those who endure long careers without any intervention by her champions congratulate themselves on their achievement. So, people don't like them because they just stick their nose in places, and that is super annoying. These are not people that are a third-party contractor. You did not hire these people to look through your documentation. Well, you probably could. You probably could seek them out and say, hey, I need some things looked over. Could you do that for me? It sounds like they would happily do so, but it sounds like they also will intercept these documents and just do it anyways, and then declare in public or in some shape or form that you messed up, you didn't write this out clearly, here are the mistakes you made. And imagine you were an employer, or imagine you're any person really who's trying to write up a contract for something, and anytime you try to get it sent out and activated to begin, these people intercept it and say, oh, here's all your spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes, and here's how you can interpret this. This is what you did wrong here. And then they start like holding you to that, saying like, this is, you either have to follow this to the letter or you need to rewrite it for what you meant. Like, that's incredibly annoying. And it's also a little bit humiliating to be called out like that in public. You know, it is ultimately, I would say, a good thing, but depending on how they're presenting it, could be very irritating and frustrating. But you know, it's funny because they are so well known for this that government officials will literally pray to Wodka that that the champions of the letter will not find them because they're so irritating. Or you could almost use it as a, you know, as a form of pride. You put it on your resume. You know, you're applying for a new job in Eora, and they're like, oh, I see on your resume you say that you've never been intercepted or accosted by the champions of the letter. Really? All your years as a political figure, you've never been accosted by these people? Good on you. That's a hard thing to achieve. They're pretty nitpicky about their documentation. That's a high praise, I would say, in those circles. The champions' most fervent enemies are the Dukes Bells of the Valian Republics. Valian Republics is one of the many factions in the world. They stem from one of the old empires of the world, Grand Valia. They are essentially a set of city-states, the Valian Republics, that you see in southern coastal cities in the first Pillars of Eternity game. You don't actually see them in Pillars of Eternity game, but they're on the map for the Deerwood area that game is set in. They're kind of like the newer Confederate nation from Grand Valia. And that's where a lot of their work gets done, considering the Valian Republics are essentially a set of mercantile companies. Owing to a combination of clerical errors and the intentionally broad and interpretable use of language in Republic law, the champions have refused to pay taxes for the last century. Those who have been caught and imprisoned for exploiting their legal loopholes solemnly vow that their order is happy and willing to pay taxes as soon as government documentation is corrected to fit their model of perfection. So, there you have a good picture of what a Champions of the Letter can be like, and also really how much they believe in this, right? They believe in objective documentation made clear. They believe in this so much that they're willing to literally go to prison, right? Like, these aren't people who are just sitting in some shack somewhere looking at documentations all day and then going to bed, waking up and do it again. A lot of these people probably have families. They have spouses, they have kids, they have hobbies that they engage in, they have things that they're doing outside their home and outside their job. Like, they probably have a life to some degree that they enjoy and like and don't want to give up. And yet they're willing to go to prison to be like, no, like, we're not going to abide in this documentation because it is not clear. It is knowingly not clear. It could be used for bad. It is not up to the standard that it should be if we're going to move forward as a society. Like, whatever the justification is from their mind as Champions of the Letter, this is how much they believe in it. And that says something. It's also cool that they can avoid paying taxes in an entire country because they're like, no, your orders are not clear. I don't know what the taxes are for. I don't know why I'm doing it. It's like finish writing up your order and then I'll happily do what you want. It's almost like they're saying, tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. But tell me what you want me to do. Don't just sort of vaguely point me in the direction of what you want me to do. Tell me what it is you exactly want me to do and I will do it. Because it says here in the lore that they would be happy to pay taxes if only they would make their documentation clear. So there you have it. And we'll just finish off this last paragraph here. This has earned the champions a semi-inaccurate reputation as an organization of lawbreakers. Their numbers annually grow as tax evaders seek sanctuary and find themselves devoted to alternative lifestyles as holy criminals. So there you go. Often vilified and even viewed as criminals in some places. Lawbreakers, those champions of the letter. Which is an ironic thing to call them, given what we read about them here. There you go. So that's the champions of the letter. I don't know if anyone out there would identify with that, whether you think that that's positive or negative. I know when I first read them, first read this stuff, I was thinking to myself, man, they seem irritating, and they're probably on their high horse and stuff. But when you actually read it, it doesn't say anything about how they actually announce these things. They could be dicks. They could just be announcing it and shaming people and judging people and all that. Or they could just be, writing anonymous letters from champions of the letter. They could be very harmlessly bringing to attention this kind of stuff. It doesn't say. So maybe that says more about me that I'm reading into it like that. But yeah, champions of the letter. Interesting group of people. Sounds like you can see them anywhere in the world. So maybe in a Avowed, possibly. Who knows? Next up, Sorrows of the Forgotten Dream. This is a name of a religious group of people. It seems a contradiction for Weil, god of mystery and obfuscation, to have an organized following. Weil, as it says here, is a god of mystery and obfuscation. He's a god, it's a god, she's a god, that they are a god. There's really not an appropriate pronoun for Weil. Is a god of mysteries, revelations, secrets, all that kind of stuff. And it is weird for this god to have an organized following. That kind of goes against everything that WoW stands for. But at the same time, it doesn't. He's a god of constant paradox. I don't know how to describe this thing. The god's devotees roost in unlikely places. Back alleys, pleasure dens, the halls of ancient ruins, other churches. So these people who follow the god well will sometimes meet in other people's churches to have their own religious ceremonies, because why not? Chaos. Let chaos reign. They will meet in unlikely places to celebrate and remember the dreams which they forgot upon waking. That'd be cool, actually. There's some dreams I would love to be able to remember. I know they were weird when I had them and I forgot them. That'd be cool if you could actually do that. They do not consider the meaning of their dreams as possessing any intrinsic value or prophecy. Rather, dreams are the divine's way of voicing the meaninglessness of all existence and the ephemeral nature of sanity. I can relate to that. I don't know about you guys listening, but for me, I have some weird dreams. I have weird dreams, dude. And I know there's many people in my life, if I tell my dreams to them, they'll be like, well, it probably means this, or it probably means that. It could be interpreted as this. The universe is saying that to you, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know what I subscribe to in that regard and anything like that. I'm open-minded to a lot of spiritual things, but whether or not dreams have to be interpreted, I don't know. Anyways, but point being that sometimes I wake up from a dream and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was just late night pizza, or that was just a bunch of random stress bubbles in my brain going like, let's smash all these thoughts together and see what weird psychedelic trip comes out of it. I don't know. So maybe I'm one of these sorrows after all. Referring to themselves as sorrows recognizes the burden of melancholy they place on their strange enlightenment. The fragility of reality offers little comfort. The sorrows of WoW do nothing to control how many acolytes join their casual ranks, but they prefer their numbers to be limited, believing that only a fraction of the population is equipped to handle the truth. So essentially, they're a bunch of people who think they're woke. And while they're okay with anyone joining their ranks as being woke, I think they're skeptical that anyone who says they are actually woke Wallites, is essentially what it sounds like. And being woke in this way, they view it as a sort of melancholy, like, oh, now that I understand the truth that there's like meaningless in all of existence and my sanity is ephemeral, it can go away in an instant, and it's only really defined by what I think sanity is or what other people think sanity is. Like, once you awaken to that truth and it really not just mentally is in your head, but it also sinks into your everyday living, there's kind of a melancholy that sets in. And I can understand that from the way that they're presenting it here. It would change the way you view the world, and it might make you a little more sorrowful. Who knows? So yeah, that's them. Who here thinks there are sorrows of the forgotten dream? I don't know. Next up is Ladies of the Aviary, which I have also touched on in my Hylia episode, goddess of birds, the sky, childbearing, arts, creativity, song, etc., etc., etc. This is what we have for Ladies of the Aviary. The chaos surrounding the Hollowbone Crisis in the Deerwood. Hollowbone Crisis was essentially the main crisis that was happening in Pillars of Eternity 1. So when you're playing that game, you are in the middle of the Hollowbone Crisis. It's been going on for a while. Long story short, babies were born with no souls, and so they were just these empty vessels. They just sat there and breathed. They just merely existed. There were no people there. So soulless people is what that's why it was a crisis. The Hollowbone Crisis in the Deerwood exposed many an uneasy truth that discrete groups have worked to alter the information or suppress it from the public. The magnitude of damage which the Leaden Key or the Hand Occult inflicted upon Eora may never be fully comprehended, but the Ladies of the Aviary work to ensure that future harm is mitigated. And what they're referring to here is essentially how a lot of these secret societies have either withheld or purposely altered historical information in order to gain their own ends and stuff like that. And a lot of that information has led to the demise of just everyday citizens like you or I. We believe that this event happened because of reason XYZ, and then we start to join these public groups that go out and seek these wrongdoers and make them pay for what they did. Turns out those people actually didn't do anything wrong, but this other secret society wanted you to believe it. Things like that can happen, right? And so the Ladies of the Aviary, so far, with what's written, seem to exist in a way to go against that. Hylia, being patroness of creative expression in all forms, her ladies gather to ensure that any artistic endeavors go uninterrupted. It's all coming back to me now, the Ladies of the Aviary. I think they would be so cool to see in Avowed or to have some sort of interaction with. They sound like a fun group of people. The ladies are enemies of censors, editors, and business owners who don't cooperate with creatively inclined clients. When a troupe of actors wishes to stage a play, the ladies represent their interest and coerce anyone who denies them a venue, no matter how outrageous the location. When a song is composed with intent to be presented in a public square, the ladies ensure by any means necessary that the local guard is nowhere near the site of the performance. The cost of the ladies' protection is a modest donation, and the thoroughness of the ladies' service attracts repeat customers from all walks of life. So essentially, they're all about all forms of creativity being demonstrated wherever and however the artists want to express themselves. They are about full freedom of expression, which I think is something most people say they are in favor of. That said, I know that they can reach areas of conflict quite a lot. I think I brought this up in the Hylia episode, but I'm going to repeat it here. A little anecdote from when I was going to university. When I was going to university, there was this one particular wall where art students would have their pieces put up, and this one particular artwork had to do with it was like a mosaic of penises, essentially, is what it was. It was just a bunch of dicks drawn in realistic form, cartoon form, and they all kind of like meshed together to look like they were hiding amongst each other. It was a really graphic piece, and I had nothing wrong with it. Some people obviously were like, oh my gosh, it's far too crazy. You can't put this out there. People can't see that. And there was debates back and forth. But the thing that I thought really merited a lot was that in the university, there was a lot of youth and children's programs that were put on. And the path that a lot of these children's and youth programs had to take walked right through this area. And a lot of people brought up that, like, hey, some parents don't want their children subjected to this stuff when they're like 3 or 4 years old. Like in this particular instance, it was just drawings of penises, but it led to the question of, like, there's been some artwork in the past that can be pretty sexually graphic. Like, how are we willing to put that up for everyone to see? Like, is it okay that a lot of these kids might see something that's very graphic, could even be borderline pornographic, depending on what people are drawing? It led to a lot of debates, and there's good points on either side of, like, is this okay to put out here for anyone to see, including these kids who have to walk by it every single day? Or should this stuff be put in a specific place where you have to go and find it, but you have to know where to go, kind of thing? It was an interesting debate, one that I never purposely reached a conclusion on for my own personal self, but that's because I was a math kid, not an art kid. I couldn't care less. Anyways, there's a little anecdote from my life for you. The ladies of the aviary would be all about this stuff being publicly displayed. They would be all about this being wherever the artist wants to put it, because free form of expression is important. And you know what? They would probably say, let the kids be exposed, because you know what? They're going to learn about it eventually, etc., etc., etc. So that's who we're dealing with here. Taking Hylia as an example, the ladies do not discriminate by quality when judging what works of artistic expression they should defend. So they don't just make sure that, you know, the big time artists or the real artists get their time in the light. Anybody who is making a sort of creative expression can get the services of the ladies of the aviary. Agreeing that, instead, Hylia's will is changing and inscrutable. The ladies believe that a bad poem could well be a test of their piety as much as a masterful one, and both are equally worthy of representation. The only quality which the ladies abhor is faint-heartedness. If an artist presents their work to the ladies' mercy, they must be prepared for total commitment, with no allowances for sick performers, rewrites, or even death. So if you're committed to your art, you will make sure you see your art through to the end no matter what. And if you are not willing to see your art through to the end no matter what, the ladies of the aviary will not help you, is what it sounds like. With no allowances for sick performances, rewrites, or even death, Berith, another deity in the world of Eora, they argue, has no cause to get between Hylia and her beloved ones, Berith being the goddess of death. That's why they bring it up here. There are dark chapters in theater history where dead actors have been costumed and propped up on stage, their lines delivered by a proxy until the scheduled end of the play's run, as the ladies dictated. So this is the degree to which, if you are contracting the ladies at the aviary to make sure your play happens in the public square, you have to dedicate yourself to it. Your lead actor just died? Okay, that's no excuse. Put him up on strings, use him as a puppet, get someone to stand behind him and run his lines for him. You make sure this play happens, because we're on the job. So there you go. How dedicated are you to your art, man? All right, so this episode's gone on a little longer than I wanted it to. I'm going to have to edit out some of the long swaths of silence that you obviously aren't going to hear because I edited them out, hopefully. But yeah, thank you guys for having your patience on my episode. It's not going to be very much edited. I'll be taking a lot of the extra commentary out, which I don't know necessarily if you want to hear. So there you have it. But there it is. Thank you for your patience while I kind of work through this wrist injury. I need it to heal up if I want to get back to work. I haven't been able to play any games as a result, so yeah, thank you for that. Before we close off, let's ask, how does this have to do with Avowed? Is there anything here that is Avowed related?
Is an oath worth the weight of a crown?
The only thing that can happen in regards to Avowed is that we might see some of these factions in the game. Now, if we're playing in the Living Lands, we're probably not going to see a ton. A lot of these exist on a different continent, and then when they do leave that continent, they head towards the Deadfire, which is, where this book is situated around, so that makes sense. But there is a chance that we could see some of them. For example, the Champions of the Letter, they exist worldwide, if I read that correctly. So you could see them in the Living Lands, and depending on the story that happens in the Living Lands, if that's where we're playing it, perhaps there's an empire colonizing over in the Living Lands, which means there's probably a lot of documentation going on. And wherever there's documentation, you can be sure Champions of the Letter are there. We could run into people who were in Rayed Saris if Avowed takes place after Pillars of Eternity 1, or 2 for that matter. Then you could run into people who fled Rayed Saris and decided that they're just going to start up their own new Rayed Saris in the Living Lands. Start fresh, as it were, and not worry about any of that stuff. So you could run into a faction that's not the Dawn Stores or the Bright Shepherd, but maybe a group of Bright Shepherds went over there instead of towards the, some sailed towards the sunrise, maybe some sailed towards the sunset, could have something like that. So there are reasons to justify why we might run into any of these factions in Avowed. It just depends on when and where the game is going to be set. But there's the potential for a few of them. I would say it's unlikely that we would see all of them, unless we're playing in the Deadfire around the time when they all exist, but I would say it's unlikely we're going to see all of them. But there's a chance we could see one or two of them. And I really hope for that, but I more so hope for new factions personally. I want to see a couple of old factions from these games in Avowed so that we can be like, oh yeah, I remember reading about that or seeing that in the first games. That's cool. And having a little bit more lore about them, being able to possibly join the ranks, that would be cool. But I also want to see some new factions. I want to see some of these new religious groups. I want to see what the Obsidian can cake up for us there. New groups of people to learn about that expounds the lore and maybe talks about a different god. Right now, all we've had is Aethys, Woodica, Hylia, and Wal. Honestly, though, anything involving Wal, I'll take that. I love that deity. Oh, man. I've tried listening to the audiobook that's in the game files for Pillars of Eternity 1 called The House of Wal. Ironically, I can't listen to that audiobook without daydreaming at some point, and so I don't actually listen to it. It's ironic because I'm trying to listen to the information, but I can never actually pay attention enough to understand what's happening. So those who understand who Wal is will get why that's ironic a little more. Anyways, that's all to say about Avowed. So let's close this episode out. Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. If you would like to send me an email, ask a question, or you want to comment on something, praise or criticize, etc., you can reach me via email, worldofeora@gmail.com. If you want to follow me on Twitter to get any updates on what's going on with the show or anything that's happening in my life that impacts the show or any new projects, you can follow me on Twitter @worldofeora. The only thing that's really going on right now is that I've had this wrist injury, and it has made writing and typing very difficult. I just remembered I haven't been updating a lot of the YouTube videos because I haven't been editing them as quickly. But I have edited a few. I'm going to type up the descriptions and upload them pretty soon. Thank you for your patience on that. I haven't been able to play many games lately. So, hey, if anyone out there has had carpal tunnel or had a wrist injury like that, are there any carpal tunnel friendly games out there? Send me an email on things that I might be able to play, because right now I can't play much of anything. Thought maybe I could play Pillars of Eternity, and then I realized you click a lot on your mouse when you play that game. So not so much the reality there, but that's okay. It's right now it's more about the healing. For those who are interested in the World of Eora, but you're not so much into Pillars of Eternity, you're just excited for Avowed, there's a YouTube series that I'm putting out, albeit a little slower now because I can't edit as fast. You can find it on my channel, Gingerino42. It's going to be a 17-episode long Critical Path Let's Play of Pillars of Eternity 1. It's just for those who want to see the world firsthand, but don't really want to play the game themselves. I do voices for all the characters. I try to just go through and expound on the lore and tell you about the story, make it a little more entertaining. It's mostly practice for me to do Let's Plays, so any criticism, feedback, praise, or disdain that you have, I'd like to hear about. worldofeora@gmail.com or @worldofeora again. That's everything I think I need to bring attention to you guys. Thanks for your patience as I heal, and it's been awesome. I'm glad I can still record. Hopefully this turns out well. Let me know if you liked this episode or didn't like this episode. Maybe I should just do a lot more freeform stuff and not edit a lot of the excessive stuff out. I normally edit it out because I feel like that's not what you're signing on for. But maybe I'm wrong. So let me know so I know what you like. And if you stay silent, then I won't know what you want. Anyways, that's all for today. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.